Hello, good day everyone. I am Nova Villamor, a registered criminologist and a Juris Doctor. I am here today to discuss to you the Citizens Armed Force of the Philippines. Citizens Armed Force, from the word itself, meaning citizens is part of the armed forces of the Philippines. So, why do we need, as ordinary citizens, as private person, why do we need to submit ourselves to our armed forces when in fact we already have the navy, we already have the army and all of that? And why is there a need for us to be part of the armed forces of the Philippines? So for today's discussion, that question will be answered. Okay, so let's go to the legal mandates. So it's not just a mere talk of the town that citizens should be part, or citizens can be part of the armed forces of the Philippines. It has a legal mandate. It's mandated by law. Okay, so we're our first legal mandate. We have our 1987 Constitution, or your constitutional mandate. So based on your Article 2, Section 4, or when in the Declaration of State Policies, the prime duty of the government is to serve and protect the people. So the government may call upon the people to defend the state, and in the fulfillment thereof, all citizens may be required under condition provided by law to render personal, military, or civil service. So see, in your constitution alone, it's very clear. It's very clear that the government may call upon the citizens of the state in case there is in case it may be required. Okay, so for in order for the government to defend themselves, if the armed forces is not enough, so the government may call upon the citizens of our country. Let's go to the number two legal mandate. So the Commonwealth Act number one, particularly Section 2, it cites the responsibility of each and every citizen of the defense, citizen of for the defense of the nation. Citizens may be mobilized in the event the national government declares an act of war or emergency. So it's also clear in your Commonwealth Act number one that the citizens can be called by the government if there is an act of war or emergency. So even you listening there, and even me, the country, our country, may call upon us in case of emergency. Okay, well, let's go to Republic Act number 7077, or also known the Citizens Armed Force Act or Reservist Law of 1991. It is an act passed into law by the Joint House of Representatives, which clearly provides the policies and procedures in the creation and administration of reservist and reserve units of the armed forces of the Philippines. So later on, let's dig deeper as to who is this reservist, who are considered reservists. So as me myself, I am a reservist. So I will discuss on this later on. Our last legal mandate is your Republic Act number 9163, or also known as the National Service Training Program Act or National Service Law of 2001. So it defines the policies and procedures in administration, training of ROTC units in relation to other two components, which is the Civic Welfare Training Service, or the CWTS, and Literacy Training Service, or the LTS, of the National Service Training Program. So in our school, the criminology, and during our time, we still have the maritime. They are required to enroll in the ROTC units. While on the other courses, they may opt to enroll CWTS, ALTS, or ROTC. Okay, as I have mentioned earlier, let's go deeper to your Republic Act number 7077, or an act providing for the organization, administration, training, maintenance, and utilization of the citizen armed force of the armed forces of the Philippines. So remember that I have been mentioning the citizens armed force. So as I mentioned earlier, citizens armed force, so meaning we, the ordinary citizens of the Philippines, can be part of the armed forces, of our armed forces. Okay, the mission of this law, your Republic Act 7077. What is the mission? So, in my discussion, I will not go through every section because it's quite long. It has 71 sections. So I choose to pick only, or I picked only the most important one, or I think, or should I think, the important sections or the important provisions. So for your section 7, you have again the mission. What is the mission of this act? So the mission of the Citizen Armed Force, alternately referred to as the Reserve Force, is to provide the base for the expansion of the armed forces of the Philippines in the event of war, invasion, or rebellion. So as you can see, we are the Reserve Force. From the word itself, reserve. So from Reserve Force. So in case of war, in the event of war, the reserve force is the expansion. It's the expansion of the armed forces of the Philippines. You know, the not the armed forces itself, but the expansion. So in case there is a war, invasion, rebellion, or there are disasters and calamities, the government may call upon the citizen armed force or the reserve force to give assistance. Okay, and also to assist in the socio-economic development and to assist in the operation and maintenance of essential government or private utilities in the furtherance of overall mission. So just remember that the reserve force, the reservists, they are the expansion of our armed forces. So for me, I am a Navy reservist. I enrolled in the NROTC as advanced officer last 2011 to 2015. So I am a Navy reservist. So in case there is this war, invasion, or rebellion, and the government, the government may call upon me, may call upon us, all reservists, to give assistance or to render our services to the country, to our country. Okay, let's go to the organization. So we have the five organization here that namely the Army Reserve Component, the Air Force Reserve Component, the Navy Reserve Component, and the AFP, or Armed Force Wide Technical Reserve Component, and the affiliated services. So these are the reserve components which shall conduct trainings for citizens in order for them to become a reservist, okay, to be part of the citizen armed force. Let's go to the categorization of citizen soldiers. So there shall be three categories of citizen soldiers of our armed force reservists. So the first category reserve, the second category reserve, and the third category reserve based on age. So there are three categorization of citizen soldiers. Let's go to the first category reserve. So the first category reserve shall be composed of able-bodied reservists whose ages are between 18 years and 35 years inclusive. So as you can see, this age from 18 to 35, they are still very active and they are still very strong because, di ba, very young, and can be used by the government in case there are really call for there's really a need to call for help from the citizen. Let's go to the second category reserve. So the second category reserve is that it shall be composed of able-bodied reservists whose ages are between 36 years and 51 years old inclusive. So they are a bit older than the first category reserve. So from 36 years up to 51 years old. Then let's go to the third category reserve. So the third category reserve shall be composed of able-bodied reservists who are above 51 years of age. So even if 51 years of age, but they are still able-bodied, they can be considered as the third category reserve, or they are considered the third category reserve. So Next, let's go to section 13 of your Act 7077, or the classification of reserve force units. So, based on the categorization provided in section 12 above, the reserve force units shall further be classified into ready reserve, the standby reserve, and the retired reserve based on their operational readiness or immediate deployment or utilization. So remember that categorization of citizen, we have the first category reserve, the second category reserve, and the third category reserve. In your section 13, we will go to the classification. So we have reserve force and the ready reserve force, the standby reserve, and the retired reserve. So the first one that I have discussed are the categorization, and this is the classification. So let's go to the ready reserve. So the ready reserve shall be composed of citizen soldiers belonging mostly to the first category reserve. So what are those soldiers or citizen soldiers that belongs to the first category reserve? So these are the soldiers that ages from 18 to 35 years old. So that's the ready reserve. So from the term ready alone, ready reserve, they are ready to serve. And then it belongs mostly to the first category reserve and others as provided in this act, who shall be organized, trained, and maintained as mobilizable, ready reserve subject to call at any time to augment the regular armed force of the AFP, not only in times of war or national emergency, but also to meet local emergencies arising from calamities, disasters, and threats to peace, order, security, and stability in any locality, including the need to provide assistance in relief and rescue work and other civil assistance activities. So this ready reserve, this reserve citizen soldiers, they can be called anytime, not just in times of war or in times of calamities, but also other disasters and threats, or anything that would ask that would ask them to help or to render service to our government. So they should be ready at any time, at any cost. Okay. Then let's go. Oh no, it's still part of your ready reserve. So any reservist or citizen soldiers belonging to the second category reserve and or the third category reserve, particularly the commissioned and non-commissioned officer, who will volunteer to serve with the ready reserve, shall be allowed, if qualified and fit for duty, to join and actively participate as part of the ready reserve and shall serve with an appropriate ready reserve unit. So even if the second category reserve, so we have the ages from your second category reserve, 36 to 51 years of age, they can still be part of our ready reserve citizen soldier, if they volunteer and if they are qualified and fit for the duty. So even if they are older, pwede gapon sila ma-part sa ready reserve. Furthermore, members of the Armed Forces of the Philippines affiliated reserve units of various government and private utilities and services considered essential for the preservation of the economic stability of the country or particular locality, such as power and electricity, water supply, transportation, and communications, among others, regardless of their categorization, shall be classified as ready reserve. So other members, if you are qualified or fit for the ready reserve, then you can be part of such of that classification. So again, the ready reserve, they are almost on call. So every time there's a disaster or even a calamity, even a small assistance from the government, they can be called anytime. So that's the ready reserve. Those are already reservists. Then all citizen soldiers belong to the first category reserve, except those except those exempted except those exempted under this act shall be required to serve with their reserve units and will have assignments and promotions in accordance with existing policies of the AFP until transferred to and standby reserve by virtue of their age. Okay, the following citizen soldiers may be exempted from rendering service with said reserve unit. So, active members of the armed forces, those who are residing abroad but only during the duration of their absence, and those who are physically and mentally unfit to serve their duty. So, those are the citizen soldiers that may be exempted from rendering service with the service unit. Additional to those who are convicted of crimes involving moral turpitude and those who may be exempted from duty for valid reasons which may be authorized in a case-to-case basis by appropriate and competent authority. For this purpose, the AFP shall issue such appropriate guidelines, rules, and regulations as may be necessary. So that's the content of our first classification, which is the ready reserve. Let's go now to our standby reserve. So the standby reserve shall be composed of citizen soldiers belonging mostly to the second category reserve and the third category reserve. So the standby reserve, so meaning the standby, they are only what do you call that? Standby lang anay sila. So they are the standby reserve. So the standby reserve composed of the second category uh, soldiers, which are or citizen soldiers from ages, as you can see here, the standby uh, is from the second category, sir, from 36 to 51 years of age. So that are those citizen soldiers that from 36 to 51 years of age can be considered or is a member of our standby reserve. So what is this? And even in the third category reserve, even if they're 51 years above, except as provided in this act, if they are able body and they are fit, then they can be part of our standby reserve. Then the members of the standby reserve shall be organized and assigned to specify the reserve units and shall be maintained through annual assembly test to update their records and their present addresses, among others. So the standby reserve may be mobilized or ordered to active duty only in times of national emergency or war. So the standby reserve are only called in times of national emergency or war. The first one, the ready reserve, they can be called during emergency or war and even if there are calamities. So there's an additional workload for our ready reservists than our standby reservists. So standby reservists are particularly mentioned here that they can only be called in times of national emergency or war only. Okay, let's go to our retired reserve or those from 51 years old up. So the retired reserve shall be composed of citizen soldiers who have qualified for retirement through length of service, old age, or disability. For this purpose, 65 years shall be considered as the retirement age. 65 years shall be considered as the retirement of age. Then, however, if qualified and fit for duty, a member of the retired reserve may be ordered to active duty in times of local or national emergencies if he volunteers for active duty and when the Secretary of our National Defense determines that there are not enough qualified citizen soldiers with his special skills and qualifications in the ready reserve or the standby reserve in his particular area of residence. So I have to correct, our standby reserve belongs to our second category reserve and third category reserve. So that's from 36 years old, 51 years old, and 51 up. Our retired reserve is from ages 65 years up. Okay, so those retired reserves supposedly they're not going to serve in the in our country because they're already considered as retired. However, if there are no other people that has his skill or that can perform well as that particular person do, even if he's old, he can still be called to render service. Okay, so that is the composition of our retired reserve. Let's go to the incorporation into the reserve force. We have the section 44, the elected officials and presidential appointees. Elected officials and presidential appointees may be commissioned in the reserve force subject to the existing AFP rules and regulations. We also have our section 45, or the award of ranks and assignments to reserve units of graduates of ROTC. So graduates of basic ROTC shall be given a reserve enlisted rank and serial number and assigned to reserve units and mobilization centers in their provinces. The ranks to be awarded shall be from private to sergeant or its equivalent, provided that the quota for non-commissioned officers shall not exceed 5% of the authorized strength of the unit to which the reservist shall be assigned after graduation. So provided further that those to be awarded rank above private shall be chosen based on merit. Those who continue to the advanced ROTC course shall continue to carry their enlisted rank until their successful completion of the advanced ROTC. So as for my experience, my batches, they were given this serial number only after a special training given to them. I think if I'm not wrong, I think the training was called MS3 training. So it's a different training. It's not the training that we have done from our school, but it's another special training, another level of special training. So they were given after that training. I think the training happened in Cebu City. After the training, they were given serial numbers. So I think that is the meaning of this section, the serial number for the advanced ROTC graduates. Then let's go to your ROTC, to your Reserve Officers Training Course. So what is this? Uh, Establishment of ROTC units and schools. So at such colleges, universities, and similar institutions of learning that request for the conduct of military training in their institutions, there shall be established and maintained Reserve Officers Training Corps units as the Secretary of National Defense may approve, which shall conduct military training for the students of such institutions for the purpose of producing enlisted and officer reservists. So the program of instruction shall be prescribed by the Secretary of National Defense and may include instruction to prepare female students for military service, provided that such course of instruction shall be not exceed 2 academic years. So you're in the establishment of ROTC. So every school in the country, every university in the country has an ROTC unit. So this ROTC unit, they trained the students to be able, they train them in a military way to prepare the students in case they will enlist as in the future, or to prepare them to become an officer reservist. So as for me, again, I am in an advanced in ROTC officer, so I served the school in from 2011 to 2015. Okay, so provided that such course of instruction shall not exceed 2 academic years. So in cases, if you're not going to enroll for the advanced and ROTC unit in specifically in our school, the ROTC subject is only given, or you will only enroll that for 1 year. So in case that you are going to take for an advanced officership, you are going to train, or you're going to be part of that community for more than 2 years. So okay, so again, the course of instruction shall not exceed 2 academic years. So in case of enlisted reservists, and 4 academic years in the case of officer reservists. So that's in my part, 4 academic years, which shall include as necessary summer or probationary training of not more than 60 consecutive days. So the first 2 years of ROTC training, which is mandatory, shall hereafter be referred to as the basic ROTC, while the second 2 years after said basic ROTC, which is voluntary only, not mandatory, A voluntary shall hereafter be referred to as the advanced ROTC. So the allocation of ROTC units to the various major services of the Armed Force AFP shall conform to the projected manpower needs of their respective reserve components. So during our time, we only have the Navy. We still don't have the army, so I enrolled in the navy, so that's why I'm in navy reservist. And as of today, currently they have army already in the school. So if you're enrolled in the criminology, and if you are going to have back our maritime education, these two courses are mandatory or are required to enroll in this ROTC course. And again, the other courses, they may choose to enroll in the CWTS, in LTS, and the ROTC. So I still have other friends who are not criminology and not in the maritime courses, but they are enrolled in the ROTC. It's more fun in ROTC, guys, trust me. Okay, so is ROTC mandatory? Uh, the answer, no. ROTC is not mandatory. Reserve Officer Training, or the ROTC in the Philippines, is one of the three components of the National Service Training Program. So the Civic Education and Defense Preparedness Program for Filipino college students. ROTC aims to provide military education and training for students to mobilize them for national defense preparedness. Its specific objectives include preparation of college students for service in the armed forces of the Philippines in the event of an emergency, and their training to become reservists and potential commissioned officers of AFP. Again, it is not mandatory. ROTC is not mandatory. However, if you enrolled again in criminology, you have to take up ROTC because, it's part of the training. At least you have a little taste of what they called military training. You trust me, it's fun if you enroll in the ROTC unit. Okay, that will be the end of my discussion. And I hope that you learned something, even just a little thing. It means a lot to me. And thank you for listening, and have a good day. Keep safe, guys. Thank you for listening.